Culture has always been a very important part of humanity. It's how we spread our thoughts, ideas, it's how we bring each other together as a community. The Roman Catholic Church is a perfect example. It brought a ton of people together and just united whole nations under one idea. However, when you look at the impact that that has on technology, you've seen from past events, perfect example is Galileo. When he told the world the Earth was round, which was true, the Roman Catholic Church resisted him and ended up persecuting him and making all of his ideas take about another 100 years to set in. This is going to happen today in the world. Right now we have technology that is part of our culture. Facebook is part of our culture. And we have these developing countries who are not used to these new ideas and perhaps can reject them due to their culture. Definitely thinking about the EWB, Engineers Without Borders. For example, we went down and we set up a well for a village in Africa. And what happened was the villagers, we found out about 3 months later, were still gathering water about an hour and a half away for their resources. And when we asked them why they were doing this, it's because they thought that the well was actually haunted and there were spirits in it, and they didn't understand how it worked or how the water was coming about. It wasn't developed through their cultural practices. They hadn't developed it themselves. Instead, this technology was imposed upon them. And when we have technologies imposed on us, such as this village in Africa or Galileo just coming straight out of nowhere with these ideas, it creates a divide and a resistance to these changes, which is inherent in humanity. Evolution has taught us to do what we know. Go and hunt in the forests that we've always understood. Through the learning of lessons, we've found that changing our environment can be our downfall. So resistance to change is a natural part of humanity and could potentially increase the gap between third world countries and countries with technology today.
Surprisingly, nations with few natural resources are demonstrating greater economic growth than those who are resource rich. Japan's economic growth, driven by technological superiority, outpaces that of Saudi Arabia. South Korea is growing faster than oil-rich Nigeria, and Taiwan's economy has moved well beyond that of oil-rich Venezuela. The United States and Norway are also rich in oil, yet their staggering economic growth comes from intellectual capital. Intellectual capital drives prosperity, meaning poverty is driven and sustained by a lack of intellectual capital. The longer countries wait to invest in information technology, the greater the digital divide becomes, as those already invested will continue to grow at an exponential rate.
Moore's Law states that computing power doubles each year. Technology had a very early starting point in rich countries, which gives them the ability to develop very powerful technology. For example, when a product is released, a better and newer model is already in the works. Poor countries have already had a really late starting point, which can make it impossible for them to bridge the gap. So this is a graphical representation of Moore's Law. These are two countries that started developing technology 1 year apart. The gap is already very wide and is only going to continue to get wider.
Providing resources to poor countries equally is impossible because you cannot provide technology everywhere at once. There's also a lack of existing infrastructure, so you have to build from scratch in all of these countries, and you cannot do that at the same time. Also, the government of most of these countries cannot afford to input this infrastructure because they're spending all their money paying off debts, trying to feed their country. Another big issue is the maintenance of this technology. As I mentioned before, you cannot provide technology everywhere at once, so the first place you input technology, by the time you finish inputting that same basic technology somewhere else, it would be broken down or outdated in that first location.
One of the important problems that developing countries are facing these days is the concept of brain drain. With use of technology, the people in developing countries can gain a lot of knowledge and become well educated. When I say well educated, I mean with Western countries' standards. But when they become educated, they become good at what they do, they simply leave their countries and fly to developed countries because they think in their developed countries they're going to have better opportunities and better life, which means it will waste all of their government resources that they provided to educate these people. Governments spend money and invest on their people to have a positive impact on their society at the end. But in this case, all of this is going to be wasted.
The cost of technology versus the cost of living comes down to the economic feasibility of establishing technology in poor countries. Yes, technology is becoming more inexpensive with time. However, it will always require some amount of money to purchase and maintain, money that can be used for better purposes, like purchasing food, water, or medicine. Not only will it cost money to purchase technology, but there are many other components that are required in order to bring technology to poor countries. Countries will have to establish phone lines, networks, and power grids capable of supporting this technology. This all equals money. Basically, it comes down to this. You can purchase one laptop or send multiple children to school for the same amount of money. People would learn more from a proper education than from a laptop. From our perspective, technology is considered an investment. However, stacked against the fact that poor nations can barely afford basic needs, they may not see the investment of technology. The mother of a poor family is not going to spend money on a piece of technology when she can purchase the basic needs for her family. The bottom line is technology would be nice to have, but for the price, it is not an essential.
For the majority of people, it is really difficult to teach themselves a new piece of technology. In the case of poorer countries, it is even more difficult. They don't have the resources to teach their teachers how to use these technologies, and as a result, the teachers can't teach their students how to use it. So, even if we were to provide a lot of poorer countries with technology, they still wouldn't be able to self-learn how to use it. Even in the case of educated people, for example, just take our older generation, they are having trouble learning just even basic things like how to navigate around Facebook.
There are many factors affecting population growth, mainly being child survival rates, access to medicine, education, and pretty much all the things we take for granted here in richer nations. As child survival rates increase in poor nations, their populations grow exponentially due to the fact that they have large families and they use it as an insurance policy. You have nations in Africa who are having large families to make sure that they have enough money when they're older so that their kids can take care of them. And here we have our very career-focused populations. For example, Japan is one of the #1 nations in terms of their intellectual wealth. And their population is declining rapidly because you have career-focused citizens who are working day and night trying to ensure that they have the best base before they actually start a family and end up never doing so. This will create a gap that is only increasing between the poor nations and the richer nations because we'll have the declining population of the richer nations who are career-focused while we only get an increase in the poor nations' population. And coupled with our other points, that'll only increase the gap between rich and poor nations in terms of their technological development.